Think Realty Nation, it's Abhi Golhar. Welcome to the Think Realty podcast. I have a good one for you today. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're connecting with Matt Rodak from FundThatFlip. And it's interesting when we have the conversation with lenders and we start reflecting back on what happened in 2008, 9, 10 versus the market today. So we're talking about that. We're also going to talk about where we are in the cycle and how new investors and pro investors can get prepared and what maybe you should be doing a little differently. Should you be buying to flip? Should you be maybe buying to rent? What's the ideal exit strategy? And how can FundThatFlip help you in your endeavors? Following that, maybe a quick 1 or 2 minutes on smart apartment technology. So if you're an apartment investor and you're in the multifamily space, what technology can you use so that your apartment complex gets smarter? That and more on the show today. I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. This podcast is brought to you today by U.S. Probate Leads, which offers probate leads to investors and realtors for counties throughout the country. Learn more at www.usprobateleads.com. Mr. Rodak, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Matt Rodak, founder and CEO here at FundThatFlip, and we are a direct lender that specializes in bridge financing for experienced single-family investors. So a lot of fix and flip loans, new construction loans, bridge to perm financing, pretty much any type of short-term financing, so long as the underlying asset is a 1 to 4 family property. What makes it a little bit different from some other lenders that are out there is we've built really a technology platform that one, creates a lot of ease of use for our borrowers, everything from how to apply for a loan through servicing the loan and payoff. But that technology platform also has helped us build out a very large network of investors that participate in the loans that we originate. So we've got thousands of high net worth individual investors that can participate in our loans on a fractional basis. And then we also work with a number of institutional investors like hedge funds, REITs, insurance companies that also finance our loans. So kind of the benefit for our borrowers and how we try to position ourselves in the market is really being a capital markets partner for our investors that need capital, really with one point of contact being us and our platform, but also getting access to the high net worths of the world, as well as some of the more institutional investors, ultimately with the goal of trying to match the right deals, match the right borrowers up with the right forms of capital.
Got it. So smart capital, lending to borrowers that make sense on deals that have the highest probability to perform. My kind of company. That's awesome.
That's it. Yeah.
What's the environment now versus the environment back in 2008 and 9? We all remember that as a crazy time to be alive in the real estate world. There was so much good that was happening, but then also so much bad that was happening. Compared to 2009, where are we today, and what's your gut telling you?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that we've seen happen over the last 10 years, and we started the company in 2014, so kind of right in the middle of that, but I was previously doing some investing myself, so yeah, on the front end of this decade. We've certainly transitioned right from a buyer's market to a seller's market. Back in 2009, you could have bought anything almost at any price and made money.
Yep.
And today obviously it's much more difficult to be able to buy right, just as I think a pure function of the amount of supply. So I think whereas 10 years ago it was easy to buy things in terms of the amount of inventory, but was more difficult to finance. Now, right, we've got it's more challenging to buy right, which means you got to have systems, you've got to have a very kind of, I think, thoughtful approach to how you're finding inventory. I think that's one of the reasons too why we're seeing a lot of the market start to be taken up by larger operators or middle market operators that have true businesses built around the acquisition side of their business.
You bring up a really good point, which is a business built around the acquisition side of what they are currently doing in their current operation. That's really fascinating to me, right? We talk a lot about, and on the show we've had many guests, and we talk about what people are doing right and what people are not doing right, more specifically investors or wholesalers or agents or brokers or realtors or flippers, buy and hold real estate property. Everybody needs to be focused on building a business and then getting to that point where you have some sense of scalability. Is that different today than it was back in the day in 2009 and 10?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all remember, right? If you're playing in the game or even just watching the news, you used to be able to go to, the court steps and buy hundreds of properties, right? Like those days are gone, right?
Right.
So, um, the guys that we see are doing it well are one starting in a channel, whether that's direct mail or door knocking or finding wholesalers or whatever it is, and committing to that one strategy, building it up, figuring it out, scaling it, and then starting to figure out what the second strategy is.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing, and then a third strategy, and a fourth strategy, and a fifth strategy, right? So it's a multi-pronged approach, because I think you have to be. And it's also supermarket specific. There are still markets where you can buy good deals off of the MLS.
So which
Um,
markets are those? Because I want to know. Matt, you got to spill the beans, bro.
yeah,
Spill the beans.
I mean, I see so parts of Chicago.
Okay.
You can still get properties off of the MLS. I think there's other. I think it's also right to your point. You've got to have a business around it. People that are buying successfully off of the MLS are putting out hundreds of offers a day.
Yeah.
Right, and they're hitting on a very small percentage of those, and they're also building algorithms and buy boxes to know what the price is they can pay for those properties, putting contracts out and hoping somebody hits, right? So
Yes.
again, it all kind of it's got to be what the strategy is. There's other people that will knock on 6 doors that they found off of whatever list they purchased to have high probability of a seller wanting to sell, and they're only working those 6 leads, but it may take them 2 years, right?
Right.
So I don't know that there's one strategy is better than the other. I think part of it is you have to know your market. The other part of it is you have to understand what the strategy is and commit to it.
Got to commit.
Some level. Yep.
Yeah, got to commit. And you bring up something very interesting and something else that we need to continue talking about on the show. And so thank you for bringing this up, which is there are buyers out there, not necessarily only institutional, because institutional, they've got the software and all the built-out automated offers, right? Like they can do that. If you're a small operator and you're looking at buying, it is a complete waste of your time if you're submitting handwritten offers, right? So build technology into your business, get to the stage where you're tech-enabled, hire a VA, and that's all they do, right? They don't use pen and paper. They are using PandaDoc or DocuSign, but they're using that in cooperation with some type of MLS access or Zillow access or some API connection, and they're using like a Zapier to connect the two, and all of a sudden you're cranking out offers. That's how everybody wins right now, especially if your buy box is narrow and you know exactly what you're buying. So let's transition to the conversation to the concern of a recession or some type of correction that's looming, dooming, glooming. Something's happening. We don't know when it's happening. There are a lot of investors now that are jokingly saying, Matt, listen, I've been saying for the last 2 years that there's going to be some type of recessionary environment in the next 12 to 16 months, and everybody has a good laugh as if that's a good topic of discussion. What exactly is going to happen? Because you have boots on the ground, you have your ears to the ground every single day, and you have a crystal ball and I don't. So what's going to happen?
I think if you say that there's a recession going to happen in the next 12 to 16 months long enough, you'll eventually be right, I think is the saying.
Yes, exactly. And then I'm going to go create a course around how I predicted the future. Right. And you and I are going to make millions of dollars on this course, Matt.
Sign me up. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Yes.
I mean, I think the reality is, and I've spoken a lot about this. We just went through a capital raise for the company, and this was a big question for us. And it forced me to look into a lot of data to develop a perspective. And what I learned is I think a lot of people suffer from what I call recency bias, right? So everyone thinks that because we're at peak prices and we're above the 2007, 2008 prices, when we have a recession, we're going to have the same experience that we had back then. The reality is, if you look back over the last 50 years, we've had 6 recessions, and real estate has proven to be somewhat uncorrelated to the larger, economic picture. So we've had, in those 6 recessions, real estate went up actually in 2 of them, right? It went down in 2 of them, and it stayed flat in 2 of them. So again, not a whole lot of data actually supports that what happens at the macro level of our economy flows into housing prices. I think what we saw in 2008 was that recession was actually caused by housing, right? And we all, have some ideas of why. right? So I think the first assumption that a lot of people have to challenge somewhat is, just because we may have a recession in 12, 16, 24 months, I don't have the crystal ball. Does that necessarily mean we're going to have a negative impact? Do we believe that's actually going to have a negative impact on housing? I could make a case that maybe that won't actually be true. I think the other
Yeah.
piece of this is, again, kind of going to the recency bias. Generally speaking and historically speaking, real estate is not a national market, right? So we did see a pretty national, an event at a national level during the last recession. But again, historically, that's not how real estate markets operate. They're much more regional at the MSA level, and oftentimes even more granular. So do I think there are certain markets that are more exposed than others to some type of pullback or correction? Yes, I do. And I think, you can pull some data and start to develop your own perspective on that. But I also think there's a lot of markets that still have a lot of room to run. So, what we do here is we pay a lot more attention to the fundamentals of supply and demand. And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, but if we look at a national basis, as a country, we've underbuilt about 2.5 to 3.5 million single family houses over the last decade. Right. So when I talk about fundamentals, it's like any other business, right? Supply and demand. What is the supply? What is the supply telling us? What is the demand telling us? On the supply side, it's telling us we don't have enough houses. And the other thing that's working, I guess, in the favor of stability, if you will, of the market is it's a lot harder to add inventory today than it was even 10 or 20 years ago. You've got land constraints. You've got the cost of land has gone up. We're seeing cost of materials up almost 70%, over the last 12 to 18 months. Labor is short because we lost a lot of our workers during the last decade, right? So all of these things lead to we can't add a lot of supply really fast, which I think in some regards is healthy for the market. But it's also, I think, is a big thing that's driving. We hear a lot about affordability, right? And can people actually afford to buy homes, even if they want to buy homes? So,
Right.
the supply side of the equation, I think, favors some stability in the market on a go-forward basis. The demand side, I think, also gives us some tailwinds. We've got the millennial generation that everyone wants to talk about, but the reality is, right, they're the largest demographic. They represent the largest percentage of the workforce today. They're hitting their peak earnings. They're starting to get married and have families. Right. And the result of that is if you look at apartment inventory, only 7% of apartments have more than 3 bedrooms. So by the time this millennial generation, who's primarily been living in apartments, starts to have kids and the dog and the second kid, they need more space. And that means they need single family homes. So I think there's a lot of demand that's going to be coming online over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, just out of this younger generation, on top of the fact that people are living longer and our population continues to grow, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't get as scared as a lot of other folks do, I think, on where we at in the cycle. And again, you have to kind of boil this down on the market that you're operating in. But if you're looking at the supply and demand fundamentals, I think there's still a really good story for, if not, 8 to 10% appreciation like we've seen, at least something that's more sustainable in the 3s, 4s, and 5s.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm okay with getting to a 10, right? If I'm in, say, Birmingham and I'm seeing if I'm seeing 8.5 or 9% yield on my property, and then I see the rest of that yield coming from appreciation at like 2.5 or 3, and it's just growing at that 2.5, 3%, I'm still over a 10. Something else to consider is millennials. There's a 4% differential between millennials buying homes and their previous generations of buying homes. Essentially, there's 4% less. Millennials as a whole represent 4% less of the population of folks that are buying. So what's interesting about that is landlords are winning the game right now. And like you said, the moment that these millennials start having kids and like 5 extra pets because, I need emojis for my pets and my Instagram feed, that's all I care about, then I'm going to have to buy. And guess what's happening? Those millennials then will start buying homes. So I agree. I'm not necessarily concerned that the housing market's going to take a major dip. Equities, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different story. But the housing market, from what I'm seeing nationally, I'm not overly concerned. So that's that.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think just there one more last point. And I think
Yeah.
what's interesting about that a little bit is we're starting to see, right, over the last decade, there was this big movement into the cities and the denser areas,
Yeah.
right, and somewhat of a flight of the suburbs. There was a Wall Street Journal article recently published where that's starting to reverse a little bit. And I think a big piece of that again goes back to the affordability. The types of inventory that builders can now build is further a little bit further out.
Yeah.
What is interesting though is they're not building the mega mansions out there. They're building more efficient homes on smaller plots of land and still adding a lot of amenities. So I think the market is catching up a little bit to what the modern buyer is finds value in.
Yeah, that's right. If you even like do a time lapse of Atlanta, you're talking about the flight of the population. It's like this, and you time lapse it. It's like this living, breathing organism
Yeah,
over the
yeah,
last like 25 or 30 years. The population goes out to the suburbs and comes back into the city, then out to the suburbs and back to the
yep,
city. It's like this thing that's breathing, which is kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't
yep.
know if that matters, but I think it's just kind of cool. I mean, I'm a geek. This is what I do on the weekends. I like model data and like animate
Yep,
it. So it's kind of weird.
yep.
All
It's
right,
cool.
one last question for you. Take 15 seconds. Is now a good time to be a flipper? For those that are new and just getting into the game and, I want to be like Chip and Joanna Gaines and make a crap ton of money. Should I do that?
Yeah, the advice I give to everyone is you have to treat it like a business if you're going to get into this, right? I think now is always a good time, right? Now is always a good time to get into real estate investing. You have to treat it like a business. You have to develop a strategy. You have to understand what's happening in your market. Just because it works for Chip and Joanna Gaines in Texas does not mean it's going to work for you in your local market. So the
Right.
playbook that they've developed or anyone else has developed isn't necessarily the right playbook for you. So you got to treat it like a business and understand who your customer is, what the market's giving you, and develop some strategies to take advantage of that. So my answer to that question always is yes. It's just you got to understand where we're at in the market and play accordingly.
That's right. Matt, thank you so much for your time and insight. I certainly appreciate it. But I think what we should do is buy the HGTV network and then because then we'll have ultimate control. And then we move Chip and Joanna Gaines to like a Detroit, Michigan,
Yep.
and then see what happens. I don't know.
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio right now. We'll take them. Let's go.
There you go. Right. Chip and Joanna Gaines, you're moving to Cleveland, Ohio, and you're going to start rooting for the Buckeyes because that's what you do. Anyway, Matt, thanks for your insight.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Abhi.
You want to
Appreciate
learn
it.
more about what FundThatFlip can do for you, check them out. Go to www.fundthatflip.com and reach out to Matt and his team. They are absolutely excellent and certainly get the right kind of financing for your deals. Remember, it's not just money that you need, it's smart capital that lives in your deal. And you need somebody and a team that has that expertise and experience. So get in touch with Matt and his team. Go to www.fundthatflip.com. All right. The next segment is brought to you by Real Property Management, which is the largest residential property management franchise in North America, managing tens of thousands of properties for individuals, investors, and institutions throughout the country. Learn more at realpropertymgt.com or call 888-806-7088. All right, so the smart tech that you need in your apartment complex. According to a recent KPMG survey, 97% of real estate industry professionals think that a digital and technological innovation will impact their business. And 93% agree that traditional real estate organizations need to engage with prop tech companies to adapt to the changing global environment. Well, what can we do? Number one, self-guided tours. This is kind of interesting, right? If you take the concept of Carvana, the idea that anybody would be comfortable making a major purchase like a car completely online, you can do the exact same thing with your apartment. So whether you're renting out an apartment or even like buying a home, it's the same thing, right? Use these 3D modeling tools to your benefit and really rock and roll with them. Number two, you want to improve operational inefficiencies, especially right now when you might be having some buying challenges. Guess what you should be considering doing? Retooling the business. Right? You want to retool. So what can you do? Number one, preventive maintenance. Number two, access control. Right? Those remote locks, use that to your benefit. Access security. Okay, come on. This one's pretty easy. You put a home cam inside and you're good to go. Right? And that ensures the safety of your tenants as well. and give them that access. An automated work order system. So this is really neat, right? You don't have to call in a phone number anymore. You just do it on your app. And all of a sudden, you have somebody that's just, you got your repair person right there that's providing the service to that unit. Analytics and reporting, and of course, the property management software integration. If you're a property manager today and you're just not utilizing a proper software system within your business, you're just failing the game of life. Seriously, how can you scale? Right? You're like at 53 units and you want to grow to hundreds of units. And let's be honest, you're not going to get really profitable until you hit 200 or 300 units anyway. You need to be able to scale and be efficient. Use some type of software. That's the show today. You want to get in touch, certainly do so. Go to www.thinkrealty.com. You can find me anywhere online at Abhi Golhar and share some tips, share some advice. What are you doing to buy, sell, and engage some of these exit strategies now that the market might start to shift, as we just heard from Matt? So get in touch. Again, thinkrealty.com. This podcast was brought to you by U.S. Probate Leads, which offers probate leads to investors and realtors for counties throughout the country. Check them out. Go to www.usprobateleads.com. Think Realty Nation. Until next time, happy investing.